Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're diving right in to decode P95 frosted acrylic panels for your next commercial fit-out. So, if you've ever paid a premium for thicker frosted glass because you thought it would be more opaque, well, you definitely need to hear this. Let's tackle a question that trips up so many fit-outs. Does a thicker frosted acrylic sheet actually block more light? If you ask almost any designer, they're going to say yes, but the answer is actually a resounding no. We just naturally assume thicker equals more cloudy, right? But that logic completely falls apart with surface frosted sheets, and honestly, it severely inflates your budget. To really grasp why thickness doesn't equal privacy, we've got to define what P95 actually means. First off, the P stands for pattern, not percent. P95 is a surface texture that scatters light just on the top few microns of the sheet. The rest of the sheet underneath, whether it's a thin 2.8 millimeters or a chunky 9 millimeters, is completely optically clear cast acrylic. It's not this milky density baked all the way through the plastic. Basically, you've got a velvety matte frost on one side and a perfectly smooth gloss on the other. And this fundamental structure, it literally changes everything about how we use it. Now, usually when you're looking at specs, you're given a transmission number, say around 70%. But here's the catch. Transmission only counts how much light physically gets through. It tells you absolutely nothing about where that light actually goes. So a supplier quoting transmission alone, they're giving you half the story. You really need to look at the haze. Haze is the fraction of that transmitted light that gets scattered by more than 2.5 degrees off its incoming path. It's that scattering, the haze itself, that actually hides people, not the raw transmission. And this brings us to a massive paradigm shift in the industry. Think of it this way. On a frosted acrylic sheet, gauge is a structural decision, not an optical one, because that frosting only exists on the microscopic top layer. Doubling the thickness of the clear acrylic underneath absolutely does not double the frosting. So paying for a heavy 9 millimeter sheet instead of a lightweight 2.8 millimeter one, you're buying structural stiffness so those large spans stay flat in their frames. You are definitely not buying extra privacy. Section 1. The spatial journey. Privacy is a function of the gap, not the sheet. So if the thickness isn't doing the heavy lifting for privacy, what is? Well, it's the setback distance. Privacy is entirely a function of the gap between the panel and your subject. Let's walk through an office floor plan, starting from literally touching the panel at 0 millimeters all the way back to over half a meter, so we can build some foolproof design rules. All right, first up, the 0 millimeter setback. If you push an object right up against that frosted glass, the scatter disk we just talked about collapses to absolutely nothing. The image stays perfectly sharp. So 0 setback offers 0 obscuring. But hey, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That matte face is amazing at hiding fingerprints, killing glare, and it takes ink beautifully. It's the absolute perfect finish for reverse printed cabinet inserts or bonded graphics. Just don't sell it to your client as a privacy screen for a shower door because it hides literally nothing. Step back just a bit to a 20 to 50 millimeter setback, and you enter what we like to call the LED zone. At this really tight distance, diffusing light is actually way more important than privacy. The frosted acrylic scatters those harsh, bright point sources of light into a smooth, even wash. Basically, it makes those aggressive little LED diodes stop looking like dots. That makes the specific distance the sweet spot for light boxes and backlit panels. And a quick pro tip, if you're still seeing hot spots, the fix is more setback distance, not a thicker sheet. Now let's push back a bit more, to between 100 and 300 millimeters. This right here is your most common commercial use case. Step back to around 150 millimeters, and sure, a laptop still kind of looks like a laptop, but the text on the screen is completely blurred out and totally unreadable. Push that to 300 millimeters, and a person's head just becomes an indistinct, blurry shape. This is exactly what your client is looking for in a desk partition, a counter return, or a reception front. You completely lose the defining features of the face and the screen, but you keep all that gorgeous ambient light flowing right through the office. And finally, we hit 600 millimeters and beyond. Past half a meter, the panel is doing absolutely everything it possibly can to obscure shapes. Adding more distance isn't really going to change much. This is exactly where P95 frosted acrylic shines as a highly effective substitute for heavy-edged glass, but at a fraction of the weight. It gives you full, shape-blurring privacy that is absolutely perfect for washrooms and meeting rooms. And remember, this is the zone where you actually will want to specify those thicker 5.5 millimeter or 9 millimeter gauges. Not for extra opacity, mind you, but purely to keep those large, unsupported panels perfectly flat. Section 2, the true cost of frost. Let's look at why the frosting premium collapses on thicker gauges. If you're budgeting for a massive floor plate, the pricing logic of P95 is going to seem wildly counterintuitive. Check this out. The cost premium for the frost doesn't stay steady as the thickness increases. It literally collapses. On a super thin 2.8 millimeter sheet, you're paying a 27.2% markup just for that frosted surface. But jump down to the heavy 9 millimeter sheet, and that premium plummets to barely 4.8%. So the heavier the gauge you specify, the less you're actually paying for the finish. To put a really fine point on it, once you hit 9 millimeters thick, the frosting basically stops costing anything meaningful at all. For instance, a 9 millimeter 4x8 foot P95 frosted sheet costs exactly the same $237.79 as an opaque white cast acrylic sheet from Fidar System. A thick frosted panel is priced identically to a thick solid one. Pretty wild, right? And while we're on the subject of budget, please remember this. Panel size drives your final cost way harder than the material gauge. It all comes down to how your panels actually nest onto a standard 4x8 foot sheet. Let's say you order a 900 by 2100 millimeter infill panel. Well, that consumes one full sheet and throws away over a third of the material as pure waste. But a 1200 by 400 millimeter desk screen, that nests beautifully, leaving barely 3% waste on the shop floor. Just tweaking a module dimension by a mere 100 millimeters at the early design stage is going to save you vastly more budget than trying to negotiate a discount on the raw sheets. Section 3. Material Showdown. P95 acrylic versus single-sided frosted polycarbonate. Now, the choice between these two isn't just a simple impact versus price trade-off. Polycarbonate actually wins on price at the super thin 3 millimeter gauge. And yeah, it has virtually unbreakable impact resistance. But here's the rub. It's usually sold strictly in full, uncut sheets. Acrylic, on the other hand, heavily dominates on cost the second you move up to a 1/4 inch thickness. Plus, you can get it custom cut to size, and those exposed edges can be flame polished beautifully clear. So honestly, unless you are working in a super high impact zone, acrylic is usually going to win the day. If you're handling or fabricating this material yourself, I've got 3 golden rules for you. First, keep that protective masking on the matte face until the panel is fully 100% installed. That frosted surface is highly scratch sensitive, and if you scratch it, you cannot polish it out without leaving this really obvious shiny bald spot. Second, always make sure the matte side is facing the object you're trying to hide or facing toward the LEDs if it's acting as a diffuser. And third, never forget that acrylic is a combustible thermoplastic. Always double check your local building codes if you're planning to use it in exit routes or main corridors. All right, so now that you truly understand the mechanics of optical privacy, the critical importance of setback, and exactly how to optimize your budget through nesting, you are totally ready to spec your next job. We highly encourage you to confidently grab your custom cut-to-size materials directly from the experts over at fidarsystem.com. And hey, if you want to see these exact materials in person, you've got to visit their massive showroom. It's located at Unit 29, 601 Magnetic Drive, North York, Ontario, M3J 3J2. Plus, as a huge bonus, they offer free shipping absolutely anywhere in Canada on orders over $700. I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on for your next fit out. Take a hard look at your current architectural panel specifications. Are they actually buying you the privacy your client needs based on distance? Or are you just blindly adding unnecessary weight and inflated costs to your project? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this changes how you look at material design, and we absolutely look forward to supplying your next project.